Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Courtside. I'm your host, Andrew Cohen. Courtside is a podcast dedicated to all things sports. In today's episode, I make my glorious return after a 2-month hiatus to talk about the NBA playoffs. So sit back, relax, and take a seat. Courtside. So some of you guys may be wondering where I've been for the last 2 months. And long story short, I've just been using this time to focus on schoolwork and to adjust to some of the new classes I'm taking and to take advantage of some new opportunities I've been provided with at school. So that's really what I've been doing with the majority of my time. There were a couple weeks in there where I was sick and my voice wasn't really good enough to record an episode as well. But while I have not been actually finding time to record episodes on the weekends, I have been able to take a little bit of time here and there in the middle of doing a couple of different things to kind of think about the future of the podcast as well as this direction. And basically starting next week, not this week, I just kind of wanted to get back into the swing of things, record an episode, get things going again. But starting next week, you guys should be expecting some new and really interesting things from this podcast. I don't want to spoil anything, but do expect some new entertaining segments as well as some bigger picture and longer term projects coming your way. I really want to make this kind of a unique podcast. It's different from a lot of other people. So that's really what I've been trying to think about in my time not recording episodes. But with that out of the way, let's begin talking about the NBA playoffs. So currently there's just one first round playoff series that has been completed, and that was the Boston Celtics sweeping the Indiana Pacers. And to be honest, I really didn't expect it to go any other way. I said, maybe the Pacers could win a game in there, but without Victor Oladipo, that team just... They didn't have a number one scoring threat, right? They just didn't have somebody that could take over a game when they needed to. And that, I think, is what ultimately cost them in the series. They just didn't really have a go-to guy in the clutch, in the closing moments of games to get a bucket, get some points. But I wanted to talk more about the Celtics' perspective, because I thought going in again, it was a given that they were going to win. They're just too talented to lose to the Pacers in a 7-game series. But I saw some really promising things from this team. Now, no Marcus Smart, and while obviously they won all 4 games, there were definitely some moments where I think you watched it, at least I did, and it was kind of, you felt like they missed him a little bit, at least offensively. And that was magnified by Terry Rozier not really playing well in the first couple games. Game 3 and 4, he definitely stepped up, and I think he put up 9 points in Game 3, 11 points today in Game 4. So he's definitely playing a little bit better. But without Marcus Smart, the play of guys like Rozier, but I also think guys like Morris and Hayward, who are coming off the bench, they need to play better, right? Because you're not getting the production from Smart off the bench. Instead, you're playing a guy like Daniel Tice, or maybe going forward Semi Ojeleye, kind of as your 9th guy off the bench. And I don't know when Smart will be back. I think I've been hearing around the Eastern Conference Finals, if they get there, that's probably the earliest he would return, most likely. But we'll see how that goes. But Gordon Hayward today, that's what I really want to talk about, because he goes out there, he scores 20 points, 7 of 9 from the field, 3 of 3 from downtown. But the thing that I noticed, and there have been multiple games this season, whether it's against the Timberwolves, both times they played them, whether it was against the Warriors in February right after the All-Star break on that road trip, right? There have been a couple points in the season where you're like, I think he's turning a corner, but I can't really tell. He's being more aggressive, which is great. He's knocking down his shots, which is awesome. But then he goes and, kind of starts to cool off a bit, or, injures something else, and he's out for a couple games. I think like after the Warriors game, he got a concussion or something a couple games after. But today what I saw was the aggressiveness kind of magnified, I think, more so than the other times. It felt like for me, whenever he got the ball, in his mind was, I want to make a play. I want to drive to the basket, whether that's to score, which I think was what he was trying to do most of the time, or was going to make a pass, setting up a teammate. And for me, if he's going to play as well as he did today, or even earlier in the series, he had a couple pretty solid games, he's the X factor on this team for me. Because when you compare this year's team and last year's team, right, the difference is Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, right? That's the biggest difference. Obviously, there's no Smart this year because he's injured, right? But let's say you put, Rozier's playing where Smart would be playing, Kyrie's playing where Rozier would be playing. Okay, the bigger difference now becomes Gordon Hayward, because Kyrie's going to play well. how well is Gordon Hayward going to play? And that was something I think a lot of people were talking about heading into the playoffs. That was something I personally was really interested to think about and look at and kind of focus on as the playoffs got started. And I just think today, I think he peaked a little bit, right? He got to that point where you were watching him and you felt like the confidence was there, the aggressiveness was there. And I think going forward, that's going to be huge for the Celtics. I think if he's playing well, this team can go really, really deep, even potentially make a run at the finals. And let's kind of turn to the second round, right? I think they're going to play the Bucks. The Bucks are up 3-0. No team's ever come back from down 3-0 in the NBA. The Pistons aren't going to be that team to do that, to be quite honest. So, right, you have the Celtics and Bucks now in the second round. That's what I think is going to happen. The Bucks are a much different team than last year. And this was something I was kind of falling into the trap a little bit with earlier in the year was, oh, well, it's the same teams, but the Celtics have Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward while the Bucks have a new coach. The Bucks made moves to sign Brook Lopez. They traded for Nikola Mirotic. They brought back Ersan Ilyasova. They've got something cooking there. I think they have a really good team much better than last year. And it's going to be tough for the Celtics because they have never really been able to stop Giannis. They did a decent job last year in the playoffs when they put Ojale on him. But really, I don't think any team can just say, okay, yeah, we're going to stop Giannis, right? Because that's the game plan every time, and you can never stop him. But I still look at the Celtics and I say, okay, they have the defensive personnel to defend a team like Milwaukee, right? They can switch on defense. They have guys that can defend multiple positions. I think the most likely matchup, at least early in the series for Giannis, is Jaylen Brown. And maybe you you put Jason Tatum on him a little bit. Maybe you put Marcus Morris or Horford on him once in a while. But I think they're going to be able to hold Giannis down, at least in enough games, to pull out some victories and potentially win the series. I still think not having Marcus Smart for the series is huge. Because last year it was like, okay, they're up 2-0. They're going to Milwaukee. Okay, it's 2-2. Marcus Smart comes back and you immediately felt more confident in that team winning. No Marcus Smart this year. How's that going to play, right? How's that going to come into effect? Because he is another guy that you could throw at Giannis at least once in a while for a possession or two and hopefully try to make him give the ball to one of his teammates. Again, the teammates, though, I think overall better this year than they were last year. Chris Middleton's still there, of course. Bledsoe's still there. Right? But again, guys like Mirotic, Brook Lopez, Ersan Ilyasova, those guys, their roles cannot be understated. Those guys are really important to this team. Brook Lopez has been a really improved player this year. So going forward, I think that's going to be, at least for me, the most compelling series of the second round. Because I think we're going to get Philly-Toronto. I just think Toronto is going to destroy Philly in that matchup. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Right, we got the Western Conference. I don't think those matchups are as compelling. So this is the matchup I'm going to be watching in the second round. I think it could be a 7-game series. I think it's going to be intense, competitive, physical. I really can't wait for this series. But yeah, I think the key things going forward for the Celtics, Gordon Hayward, and how much do they really miss Marcus Smart. I briefly teased this a minute ago, right? But I want to talk about the other second round series that I am predicting will happen and will come up. Eastern Conference, I have Philly and Toronto advancing. Both teams are up 3-1. They both lost game 1 at home, but since then they've been looking pretty strong. Here's why I like Toronto. I like Toronto over Philly in the series, and for me, it's pretty simple. Number one, I think Ben Simmons is overrated. I think the fact that we've seen him try shooting jumpers this year, right? We saw, I think there was a game, it was Lakers-Philly, and LeBron would just stand in the paint and dare him to shoot. And he did, and he missed. I just think he doesn't do enough offensively. People talk about his passing, how great it is. Okay, it's fine. It's better than most other guys his size and his height, but I don't think it's really all that impressive. Joel Embiid is their best player. He's banged up. He's been, playing fine, obviously. He's been playing the past couple games. But here's what I don't like about them. They are way too cocky for how little experience and success they've had in the playoffs. Last year, I think they beat Miami in the first round. Not really a tough team. And then they lose to Boston without Kyrie and Hayward. And that series was never really close. They won game 4. But the Celtics only won one road playoff game last season. and it was against Philly. I think that's pretty telling. Now, of course, this team, you had Jimmy Butler, you had Tobias Harris, right? It's a much better team. But it still is Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. That's their core, right? Jimmy Butler, you could argue for him being their best player. I think it's Joel Embiid. But, right, even if you argue for Butler, he's not the face of that team. Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, they're the faces of the team. And they're always getting into it with other teams, and it never really seems to have a purpose. Jared Dudley on the Nets is getting into the heads of specifically Ben Simmons, and Ben Simmons is retaliating. And that just, right, they're still kids. They're still young players that have not proven anything in this league. Whereas on the Raptors side, Kawhi Leonard has a championship. Kyle Lowry has been to an Eastern Conference Finals. Right? That whole team has been deep in the postseason, even last year, right? They won a playoff series. Sure, they got swept by the Cavs, and we all know about the jokes for Cleveland for LeBron versus the Raptors. But that team is just to me they're tighter. They have more of not necessarily an identity, but they play together, in my opinion, a little bit more. I just think overall they're a stronger team. They also made moves as well throughout the season, right? They brought in Marc Gasol. You have the rise of Pascal Siakam. Right, overall, they're just playing really, really well. I just don't think Philly's experienced enough, right? They lost to Brooklyn game 1. That doesn't even bother me. It's just how they're playing Brooklyn and how well Brooklyn is playing against them and how much Brooklyn is getting into their heads. To me, Toronto is going to win that series. They have the best player in Kawhi Leonard. Sure, maybe the 76ers have the second, third, and fourth best players, but to me, it's still Toronto all the way. So let's move on to the Western Conference, and here's where the series, to me at least, aren't as compelling. I still think Toronto-Philly can be a little compelling. Warriors-Houston. This one's pretty simple to me, and I had a lot of people, at school and a lot of friends telling me, the Clippers are, it's the end for the Warriors because the Clippers are able to come back, right? And I've, I know people that, even some people that said, the Clippers are, they have a chance to win a couple games here. Sure, that comeback win was great for the Clippers, and it showed a lack of focus, just kind of a lack of caring a little bit on the Warriors side. They're still so far and above the best team in that conference. It's unbelievable. To me, there's no, when I looked at the other 7 teams heading into the playoffs, I looked at the other 7 teams and I said, there's no team that can win a 7-game series against the Warriors. There's no team I even have any sort of faith in. Maybe if, Curry or Durant gets injured, I'm not hoping for injuries or anything, right? But just hypothetically, okay, maybe then. So second round, they're right now projected to play Houston. They're up 3-0, as I said earlier, with the Bucks. No team's ever come back from down 3-0. I don't think the Jazz are going to do that against Houston, especially seeing this last game where James Harden had one of the worst performances he's had past few seasons, honestly, regular season and playoffs, and the Rockets still won. But I keep coming back to this, and I say last year the Rockets were up 3-2. How did they do it? Defense. Guys like Trevor Ariza, Luke Mbah-a-Moute, right? Not big names, but guys that can play defense. Now, yeah, they still have, PJ Tucker and Clint Capella and, whoever, right? They still have guys that can defend. Chris Paul, I don't think he hasn't really been playing as well as he was last year. That's not a shock, right? He's getting older, got a big contract, doesn't have to, worry about getting paid anymore, it is what it is. But it's just the Warriors are so far and above everybody else, it doesn't matter. The Rockets aren't as good as they were last year, and the Warriors beat them last year. It's as simple as that, to me, honestly. So, to me, the Warriors are getting to the Western Conference Finals, no doubt in my mind. Now, the next matchup in the Western Conference, it's still to be decided, still to be determined. There's nobody, I think when I look at the 2 matchups right now, Portland and Oklahoma City, I was saying Portland at the beginning of the series. Oklahoma City really hasn't played well in a while. They don't have enough, in my opinion, good 3-point shooters to contend with the offense of Portland. Lillard and McCollum are playing really well, and Enes Kanter had a great game the other night. I still have them advancing. Spurs versus Nuggets is a little bit tougher for me to decide on, but I think either way, whoever wins, I'm not sure they can get past Portland, and that's surprising for me to say, because it's surprising for me to say, right? Even now, I'm kind of kind of thinking about backtracking a little bit, but Portland has the experience, and I get they've lost a lot of playoff games the past few years, but this was my concern with the Nuggets coming in. Nobody on that team, besides like Paul Millsap, had any sort of playoff experience. Their best player is Jokic, who's playing really well. He's almost averaging a triple-double. Right, but the experience, the lack of experience overall on that team was concerning to me. Whereas the Spurs, DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge, Rudy Gay, Patty Mills, guys that have been there before, right? And you have Greg Popovich, arguably the best coach of all time. You knew they'd be able to cook something up to make it challenging for Denver, and they have. And San Antonio, if they play Portland, Portland's going to win. And the fact that Denver's having trouble with San Antonio, to me, signals that Portland can win that series. To me, it's going to be Portland, Golden State in the West, and in the East, I'm going to go Boston, Toronto. Maybe a little bit of a homer pick, but I talked about it a little bit before. Boston versus Milwaukee. And again, if this matchup does come into play, if all these matchups come into play, the next episode of the podcast, I'll go a little bit more in depth and talk about my decisions a little bit more. But for now, that's going to be all. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Courtside. Join me next time for some fun, exciting new segments and topics. And subscribe to the podcast wherever you may be listening, and follow the podcast on Twitter. Link will be in the description. Signing off, this is Andrew Cohen. I will see you next time.